Price fixing can best be described as an agreement between entities to literally lock prices to a certain level. The FTC, it's the Federal Trade Commission, characterizes it as an agreement among competitors that raises, lowers, or stabilizes prices or competitive terms. This next part is important. Generally, the antitrust laws require that each company establish prices and other terms on its own without agreeing with a competitor. When consumers make choices about what products and services to buy, they expect that the price has been determined freely on the basis of supply and demand, not by an agreement among competitors. So the FTC links price fixing to antitrust laws, which were set up in the United States to avoid external collusion between entities producing consumer goods. And while random access memory may appear niche on the surface, I mean, it's not like milk or bread or something you need to survive, it's still a highly demanded product, driving massive revenue streams for companies like Samsung, Hynix, and Micron. It's important to note that these three companies share between 90 and 95% of the DRAM market, and therein lies the problem. You see, memory manufacturers in a perfect competition model, which we should note does not exist, but we use it as a reference point, attempt to meet the demands of the consumers by supplying a sufficient number of modules per month. Demand drives supply, and if supply isn't met, a window of opportunity emerges for competing firms to intervene and start producing on their own. Those savvy in economics might raise a point here, though. In the perfect model, all RAM prices are the same, as long as all RAM itself is the same. So what's the difference between this assumption and what we're seeing play out in 2018 about prices being so high but equal? And to that I say, it's from where the prices are derived. In the perfect model, supply and demand determine price, not companies supplying the goods. RAM prices jumped nearly 50% in 2017. We've heard several excuses, including but not limited to R&D, and while this certainly plays a part, it doesn't explain why supply for current node modules fell with respect to demand by the end of 2017, and why prices rose by a disproportionate amount, mind you, the same year. Companies tend to separate R&D and manufacturing facilities anyway. I mean, isn't the revenue from your manufactured goods supposed to finance at least part of your research and development? Now seriously, I want the big companies to answer that question. With the research I've done, admittedly not the most thorough, but it's enough to get the point across, these companies are repeating almost exactly what occurred in 2006, which not many people are talking about, surprisingly, when a $300 million settlement between memory manufacturers and consumers was reached. Samsung and Hynix in particular pled guilty and collectively paid over $700 million in criminal fines. Today, things are looking pretty redundant. Not even the Chinese government, that's censorship China for you, could turn a blind eye to the obvious collusion. When several DRAM manufacturers meet supply quotas year after year and then suddenly don't, we've got a problem. You see, if it was just one company, right, things would be much, much different. Maybe they just had a bad year, maybe a manufacturing facility burned down, there are always outliers. Not only would there be no price fixing, but the company failing to meet demand would lose out on potential profits, which is not what they want. That's the marginal profit per customer served. So the workaround is this: scheme with competitors to fix prices regardless of supply and demand trends. In capitalistic markets, this is illegal. It infringes upon the consumer's rights to fair and equal opportunity. In fact, it strips all buying power from the consumer. So let's extend this analogy to something a little more hands-on. We would consider cars pretty necessary, right? I mean, if you can afford one, you're going to want one. And you might not need cars in all countries. Even developed countries don't need cars. But if you want to keep up in most of them, you got to have a set of wheels. Same goes for RAM. You might not need a computer, but it certainly helps, and your PC is going to need RAM. So if you showed up to a Chevy dealer in search of a solid 8-cylinder coupe like a Camaro, and they told you that the price of that model started at $75,000, you'd probably get the heck out of there, right? A base Camaro today starts at $25-30K, and that is something that you're going to keep in mind when you show up to the dealership and then you find out that it's just so much more expensive than it should be. The buying power the consumer retains is his or her ability to choose based on price and availability. And even if a few assumptions in our perfect competition model are broken, most buyers have a pretty good idea of how far their dollar can go. $75K is just too much for a base level sports coupe from a company like Chevrolet. Not hating on their stuff, I love me some 6.2 liter action, but you know who else has a powerful V8? Ford. And even if I prefer Chevy, I'm probably going to break brand loyalty constraints if it means saving 30 grand for a comparable model. In comes price fixing. You show up to the Ford dealer only to find out that their V8 coupe starts at $75K too. But prices for these cars were like 50% lower just a few months ago. And company after company, you find a similar trend. Regardless of the base price or model, all cars have shot up 50% in price. Notice I said price and not valued there. These are artificial prices. They're just
fake.
Natural prices are based on supply and demand curves set intrinsically by both buyers and sellers. But when companies team up and price fix, especially at higher than normal prices, the consumer loses bargaining power. That's the ability to choose. For nearly a year now, consumers in the PC market have had to deal with these extremely high RAM prices. If you want a computer and can't find anything that's basically used or marginally discounted in a pre-built PC, you'll have to absorb elevated memory prices, meaning you'll have to pay that extra cost. It isn't your fault, and there's nothing you can really do about it, and that's what sucks. Look, folks, I'm not one to scream government intervention anytime I see a problem with a product's price. I'm not that entitled. When it comes to the free market, I tend to emphasize the free part. If Chevy alone decides to raise all of its car prices by 50%, I'd say let them do it. They'll sink themselves. There are plenty of alternatives. If they were instead a monopoly, which I talk more about right here with regards to graphics card prices, then we'd have a problem. What Samsung, Hynix, and Micron have done is create an oligopoly. That's a state of limited competition. It's not illegal in the United States, just look at the cell phone industry, but it opens the door to many shady things, including price collusion. So if 2018's any repeat of 2006, I expect we'll see a verdict or two at some point with these class action lawsuits, at which point prices should begin falling, but these court cases take a long time, you know what I mean? And companies are getting smarter. They're finding ways to collude without leaving data trails, and a firm can't be indicted without data trails. See what I mean? So it's a mess. RAM prices are a mess. 8 gigs today cost more than twice what 16 gigs did 2 years ago, and it just leaves a foul taste in the mouth. This is the dark side of big business. We're feeling it firsthand. Our fates rest in the hands of a few judges, juries, whistleblowers, and anyone else who can make a case against these people. It's just a helpless feeling when you want to build a PC and you find out that one of the most expensive components today has to be RAM when it wasn't the case 2 years ago. I mean, RAM was just something you had to add on, but you never really thought much about it because it wasn't too expensive, relatively speaking. But now it costs almost as much as a CPU if you want 16 gigs in most builds, and that to me is just a little ridiculous. I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you like this video, let me know. Give this one a thumbs up. I appreciate it. Thumbs down for the opposite. You can sponsor us. Click that sponsor button, or you can subscribe to get more notifications of videos like these go live. I appreciate that. The bell notification icon, by the way, that's something that just makes YouTube a pain to deal with sometimes, but if you want to click that as well, you will get notified personally when videos like these go live. Most of the time. Again, YouTube is slightly broken right now. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.